York's classic rock, Q1043.
Good morning. First, I am going to warn you that we are about to tackle a very difficult subject, but it is most difficult on the person that I am speaking to, Ed Parze of Freehold. It was in 2019 that he lost his beloved daughter, Stephanie Nicole. She was 25, she was almost 26, and she was murdered. She was murdered by her boyfriend, who, unbeknownst to her, had a record of sexual and physical abuse. The boyfriend committed suicide before her body could be found. So it was loss on top of loss. It took 87 days to find her body. And first of all, my heart goes out to you, Ed, and your family. I know this is so difficult to talk about, but I know this is so important to you during this Sexual Abuse Awareness Month, that we prevent more Stephanies, more losses, more heartache, and more violence, domestic violence. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, let's retell the story. It was, and I know this is very hard for you, it was very vivid in 2019, but some years have passed. So tell us about when you first knew that something was wrong, was off.
Well, Stephanie and my family, I have 4 daughters and my wife, they all went to a show on the 30th of October, and they all went together with a bunch of girls that came back from the show, back to the house, and then they said the normal goodbyes like they normally would. Stephanie had, kissed her mother a couple times goodbye, and as usual, her mom said, give me a text or a phone call when you get home, which she only lived about 6 miles away. And that was a normal thing. So Stephanie left, and as she was going home, she took a Snapchat shot of a restaurant that we usually go to that we passed on our way home. So we knew she was on her way home. But that night when she got home, there was no phone call, there was no text message or anything. So we started to call her to make sure she got home all right. Not hearing any response from her, we started thinking to ourselves, well, maybe she had her phone on silence at the show, so she never put it back on, and she probably fell asleep. So that was typical that it happens. So that next morning we waited to the next morning we knew she had to go to work. She was a nanny. She had to be at work at 7 o'clock. So we figured we'd start calling her in the morning, make sure she was up. I still had no answer. We even tried trying to call her, see if her Bluetooth in her car would pick up. This way, if our phone was still on silence, we'd be able to get to her. And we never got a response. So a little bit later on, my wife and I went to the house. As we got to the house, we noticed a car was still in the driveway. My wife got out of the car. She went into the house, and I noticed as soon as she walked in the house, the door was still unlocked. She walked right in. So that kind of got me a little, wondering why the door was open. My wife was in there for quite a while, so I figured she may have found her and she was talking to her. She overslept or something, but then she came back out and started heading over to the car. And as she was heading towards the car, I could see a look of concern in her face. So I asked her what was wrong. She says, well, Stephanie's not here. I said, what do you mean she's not here? Her car's here. She says, well, she's nowhere to be found. I looked everywhere. Her food from the show last night is still sitting on the piano. Her coat and her shoes are laying next to the couch, but she's nowhere to be found. The only thing funny is that every single light in the house was on, including both bathrooms, the attic light, basement lights, garage lights. They're all on, and the dog was locked in the bathroom. So that was kind of strange. So we started calling people that we knew, see if anybody had seen her. She went out with a friend maybe for breakfast or something. But she wasn't an early morning person, so that was kind of nil. Hadn't heard from her for a while, so we left. We went home. We started looking through her phone book to try and call some more friends and her work and so forth. To no avail. Called her sisters. Nobody heard from her. That's unlikely because she used to text us all the time, every time she did something. Later on that afternoon, my wife and daughter went back, my other daughter, and my wife, found the house the same way. So she decided to ping her phone, use her locator on her phone, which the phone rang in the house. My other daughter found it and stuck in the couch. And the last message we could see on the phone was, "Hi, Steph. Hope everything's okay. Are you coming in today?" Well, that was from her the parents of the little girls she was supposed to be watching. So at that point, your worry starts going into panic now, because what 25-year-old is going to leave without her car and her cell phone? That's not happening. So we started canvassing the neighborhood, walking around and talking to people who had a Ring doorbell or anything like that can maybe see something. Nothing at all. So we waited for a while. Your thoughts are, she's an adult. We've got to wait like 24 hours to call the police before she be reported missing, which is false, by the way. That is a fallacy. If anybody ever does that, that's what we're taught on TV and all these police shows and stuff. But you don't wait, you call. I always say time saves lives. So we waited a little while. We called the police that night, and the ball started rolling with the police and the prosecutor's office trying to locate her. Just couldn't find her anywhere. Nowhere to be found. Really started panicking, and we started putting the ball in motion. Stephanie's a 25-year-old beautiful young girl, and constant contact with the family. So her problem there was, Stephanie used to tell me all the time, "Dad, I'm getting old. I want to have a family. I want to get, have children while I'm young." And I used to always tell her, I said, "Steph, don't rush life, because when you rush life, bad things happen." But she was in a hurry to find Mr. Right, and she turned to the internet, apparently, found this guy on Facebook. I didn't even know they had a dating site on Facebook, and they did. After she found him, she said, she started talking to him back and forth for about a month without seeing him, just doing chats and so forth. And she was doing, I guess, her due diligence to try and make sure that this guy was a nice guy and everything. And he was doing his best to smooth her over and, put the hook in. And he did. And she called me one day and said, "Dad, I might have found a nice guy here." I said, "Okay." I said, "Be careful, where'd you meet him and everything? I want to meet him, of course." And I guess the second month she started dating this guy, actually seeing him, and everything was peaches and cream for a little while. But the only thing that Stephanie didn't know is this guy was a predator. And they're out there. I mean, they're on the internet. They're all over the place. This guy had a rap sheet as long as my arm. He had a couple of restraining orders for domestic violence, sexual abuse, already out there. And she would have no way of knowing this. We would have no way of knowing this. And shortly after it started their second month of dating, he assaulted her for the first time. Basically, just a push with the hand, and she hit her head on the cabinet. She had come over the house that night and said to her mother, "Do you see a mark on my face?" And her mother said, "No, why?" And she said, "Well, me and John were John were horse playing, and I banged my head on the cabinet." And of course, kids are going to be kids. It happens. So we were like, "Okay, be careful, stop fooling around." And we let it go at that. Now, Stephanie was a phenomenal makeup artist. If she didn't want you to see a mark on her face, you weren't seeing it. So she was just, I guess, reassuring herself that nobody could see it at that point, but she never told us anything that happened. But now we know the story, most of it anyway. Apparently she got pretty upset with what happened. We have a philosophy in our household. It's called the Parze philosophy. It's called next. Somebody ever touches you without you giving him permission, hits you in any way, degrades you in public, makes you feel like you're not important, but you don't need them. Next, move on. They're not worth it. So
Ed, did you meet this boyfriend?
I met him twice. The first time he came over the house with her, barely looked me in the eyes, and I didn't want a handshake, like wasn't even there. Like, he barely shook my hand. I actually, as they started to leave the house, I actually grabbed my daughter by the shoulder and said, "I don't like this guy already." So, because usually you come in somebody's house, especially if you're meeting the father, And it's like, hi, how you doing, Mr. Parze? You shake your hand, um, you know, try to impress me, but there was nothing near that. The second time I met him was we all had we do a family rafting trip every year. He came to the rafting trip, and the ironic thing was I had fallen into the river and was holding on to one of the boats to get, until somebody grabs you and picks you up. And he was the boat I grabbed, and he just looked at me and let me stay in the water until somebody else grabbed me. So I was not feeling a good vibe from this guy. He could easily pull me into the boat. He's a big guy. So I just didn't like him from the beginning. I told Stephanie to just be careful with this guy. But I couldn't do anything because I'm trying to let her be independent, trying to let her, make her own decisions. So I'm trying to just keep an eye on him as any father would. A couple of weeks went by. Stephanie tried to get away from this guy at that point after he touched her the first time, but he did his typical thing. They love bomb you. They start giving you all the flowers and I love you and this and that. Never happened again. Blah 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 blah. Stephanie figure, she's inexperienced with that, so she's took him back. And about a week and a half later, we had the second assault. This time he grabbed her picked her up off the ground, slammed her against the wall. Now he's 6'4", about 190 pounds. She's 4'11", maybe 110 pounds wet. I mean, so you can see the difference there. But she got away from him.
And were you aware this happened?
I wasn't aware at the point, but she got so scared this time that she actually called an ex-boyfriend that was still friends with her. He called me and he said, Mr. Parze, you better watch this guy that Stephanie's going out with because he's putting his hands on her. Okay, so now I'm on high alert. That next day I went to Stephanie's house. I actually sat down with her. I had a face-to-face conversation with her. One of the most serious conversations you could ever have with somebody. And she knew it. She didn't say a word. She was eye to eye with me, and she was kind of afraid. She didn't know what I was going to say. And I just said to her, I said, Steph, I know this guy's hitting you. I said, I'm pretty sure when he came over the house the first time that when you asked your mother about your head, that he probably hit you that time. Am I right? And she said, yeah. I said, okay, so what are you doing? I said, what happened to next? Why is he still here? And she agreed. I said, he's done. I said, out of here. I don't want to see him. You're not seeing him anymore. And, he's never going to be accepted in the family, nothing. So just end it now. So she said to me, I said, I'll take care of John. And she said, no, Dad, let me do it. And I had to make a decision at that point. I'm not going to let my daughter be who she is and be strong and be able to handle her own situations and let him break up with this guy, or am I going to have to step in? So I made a decision to let her do it after she begged me to leave him alone. And I said, okay, you do it. Probably the biggest mistake of my life, but
you were trying to be a good father and let your 25-year-old daughter do the right thing by herself and be a strong young woman. And she sounded to be a strong young woman. How much? I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Like I said, I cannot imagine the pain.
She was a very tough girl. I mean, she could handle herself. So that's why I said yes. And she did. Next day, she actually broke up with him, and she called her mother, said, tell Dad that he's done. I told him, but now that we have been involved in this domestic violence situation for so long, you learn a lot of things, and you know that when they leave the person, it's the most dangerous time. I kind of knew that because of some of the background I had with law enforcement and so forth in the past. So I was on like extreme high alert at this point, watching everything I could possibly watch. And, so she broke up with him, and a little shortly after, she wound up in the hospital for a vaping incident. She was vaping and she has asthma, so she wound up in the hospital. Of course, he found out about this and he went to the hospital. He stayed with her each night as we waited for us to leave. He would stay with her, and the hospital for some reason let him stay overnight. I don't know why, but he stayed there for 4 nights, 4 days at her beck and call, and just trying to get her back and manipulating her so bad that he finally twisted her mind enough where she said, okay, one more time. And never told us about this.
I am speaking with Ed Parze of Freehold. Tragically, he lost his 25-year-old daughter, Stephanie Parze, at the hands of her abusive boyfriend in 2019. He also was a sexual predator, but Stephanie didn't realize that he had a record. It took 87 days before the family was able to recover her body. The boyfriend had committed suicide. It's just an unbelievable horror. The reason Ed is with me today is try to prevent this from happening to more girls and boys. Okay, how much after that, the hospital reconciliation, did when did Stephanie disappear? How much after that?
Wasn't too far after. I mean, about a week after she came out of the hospital, and she had taken him back. We had another incident. This was the worst one, where he actually went after her in the house and struck her. My wife and I were sitting at home, and got a phone call from Stephanie, and all I heard on the phone was some commotion. And my wife said, "Who's hitting you?" Um, at that point, I left the house, obviously going to her. By the time I got to the house, I came around the corner on her development. I saw her running through the woods. I slammed on my brakes and called her over to the car. As she came over to the car, she was all disheveled and bleeding from the side of the face and the hand and so forth. Still in her nightgown, freezing outside, no shoes on. I put her in the car. I went to the house because she told me he was still in the house. And by the time I got to the driveway, fortunately, a police car had pulled into the driveway just before me. I almost hit the car when I got to the driveway. I had to skid to a stop. They arrested John at that point. I brought Stephanie to the police department. They took him out. And then, long story short, he went to, he got out, of course. And then on the 30th, if I go back to the 30th, that night, Stephanie just, after she got home from that show they were at, is when the whole thing started. We couldn't find her at all after that. Come to find out, he had gone to the house afterwards. After calling her constantly on the phone, of course, her phone was on silent. So one of his triggers was if you were ignored, if he was ignored, he would go off the wall. And she was obviously not answering the phone. So there was an array of explicit text messages on her phone that called her every name in the book. You can't even imagine some of the words that he used. So he must have got aggravated enough where he went to the house that night shortly after she got home. Got in the house. We don't know how, if it was unlocked or he got in somehow. He strangled her to death. Apparently in her bedroom. Then he carried her body through the house. When we were told, all the lights were on in the house because he was looking for her phone and her car keys. He had to move her car out of the way to get his car into the driveway, into the back of the house, so he can carry her out and put her in the trunk. He then got out of the driveway, put her car back in the driveway, and started taking off towards, where we're thinking, towards Staten Island. But halfway to wherever he was going, he decided to make a turn around and come back and head south again. And wound up pulling over on the side of the road in Old Bridge Township, in a well-lit place, and right next to our guardrail. There was no woods. It was just brush. We actually, while we were searching for Stephanie, we were 100 feet from her body in either direction. We have, you can see me standing there, and he just took her out of the car, picked her up over his head, and threw her over the guardrail. She only landed about 11 feet away from the road, but it was down a little bit of a pitch, so you couldn't see it if you drove by. And then she laid there for 87 days, with a hand over her head like she was sleeping. We started searching from there. We did 88 searches with fully volunteers, thousands of people from, you name it. They came from everywhere. The police were also searching. They did a bunch of searches themselves. I think we searched everywhere from as far down from Barnegat all the way up through Staten Island. Um, and that's just the organized searches. Then we did searches, of course, every day. Myself and my friends were in cars driving up and down the shoulders of the highways, looking over the railings to see if anybody was in the woods. That was every single day.
Were the police, I mean, clearly you suspected the boyfriend. What did the police uncover all this time?
Well, we were all in agreement that he was the guy. The night they went to talk to him, when they went to his house, they could see the scratch marks and stuff on his neck. They just didn't have enough evidence to bring him in yet. But the investigation was definitely fully ongoing. He was the person of interest at that point. I knew, my gut told me immediately. I mean, there's no, the minute we found her cell phone, I knew right away. I mean, that's how so I realized something definitely tragically happened, because I just know my daughter. So, I mean, he was arrested again for child pornography, which during the investigation, they found some child pornography on his phone and computer. So they put him in jail for 11 days. And during that 11 days, of course, the Bail Reform Act let him loose. So he was able to get out again. And during his hearing, when they were in the courtroom, they're not supposed to bring up anything about this case because it's two unrelated cases, apparently. But our prosecutors did such a great job. They tried to make the judge keep this guy because he was a person of interest, but they still released him because of that bail reform. And then he got out, and we were getting real close. Like I said, we were 200 feet, maybe 100 feet away from her body. And then all of a sudden we got a notice. I got a call at about 4:30 in the morning one day, and the anonymous call saying he's dead. He hung himself. Of course, I went nuts at that point. I actually got in my car, went to his house, which he lived in Freehold. And when I got to the corner of the house, I jumped out of my car to go see, because I had to know. Is there any notes? I mean, he's the only one that knows where she is. But I was met by a detective that I know for many years, and he said, get in my car before I handcuff you.
Before they handcuff you?
She's trying to protect me. And he says, you can't be here. He says, you got to get out of here. I said, well, I got to know. He says, well, I can tell you he's definitely gone. I said, I got to know this notes. What's going on? It took 11 weeks before we found out there was actually notes.
Oh.
So, that's we found that out when we had a big meeting at the prosecutor's office with about 30 different agencies, and then they finally came out with we definitely know he's the person. We found these notes, pretty much admitting it, and they showed us everything at that point. Meanwhile, we're searching every day.
How much after that did you finally find your Stephanie?
That was quite a while. About 3 weeks later, I guess.
My God.
I don't know. I can't remember the exact dates. I have to look it all up.
But, Ed, you have an organization, the Stephanie Nicole Parze Foundation, with the goal of educating and preventing this tragedy, this unspeakable tragedy, from happening again. What do you want to say to both parents and children?
Well, for the children, first of all, of course, it's hard to say, but listen to your parents. They have more experience with relationships than you're ever going to have. Try and trust them. Keep your locators on your phones at all times. Might be the only way we can ever find you. Just be wary of the internet. The internet is a double-edged sword. It's not only partly what got my daughter killed, it's also big way we found her. Um, but you have to be very careful with these predators that are out there. They're all over the place. Um, you know, check them out, do your due diligence, have them meet your parents, go with your gut. Parents, go with your gut. You don't like them, push them, get rid of them. You don't have to be a friend to your son or daughter. You know, they're not going to hate you because you're pushing them. They may act like it, but they'll come back around. You know, just do what you got to do, what you feel is right. Otherwise, it's gonna be too late.
How do you get through your days? Like I said, I cannot imagine the loss. And it's not just losing a child, it's losing a child so violently and losing a child when your gut was screaming out about this guy she was dating. Just how do you get through?
It's not easy. You know, you blame yourself. I blame myself for a lot of things. Um, but then you got to look at life that, you know, it happens. You can't be with them every minute. You can't babysit them all the time, you know, especially when they're adults. They're going to do what they're going to do. Um, you hope that they make the right decisions. And in this case, she was trying to make the right decision, but you know, I'll tell you that the power of manipulation is, if you've never gone through it before, thank God. But if you have to go through it, you'll realize that it is so strong, and you don't even realize it's happening to you. They are masters of this. They know what they're doing. I mean, he was going out with 6 or 7 different girls at the same time. I mean,
Wow.
the night he killed my daughter, he went and saw another girl. I mean, so it's crazy how they just twist their minds. Um, they just do it. I can't even explain it, and I know quite a bit more now about it than I did then, and I can't even explain it. It's just I couldn't imagine ever doing it to somebody, you know. But there are men and women out there, and it happens to men just as much as it happens to women. Um, it's terrible. They just twist your mind around, and you keep forgiving them, and you keep taking them back. And then there's so many other ways they think they can manipulate you with money and with children involved, and especially if you're married, it's just on and on and on. It just doesn't stop. I call it an epidemic. It just happens so much. It's ridiculous.
Tell us about the work that the Stephanie Nicole Parze Foundation is doing and what our listeners may be able to do to help your foundation. We only have a couple of minutes left.
Okay, well, the foundation right now is serving all of New Jersey. We are based in Monmouth County. We help educate and support families of missing loved ones. We help educate them, both adults and kids from pretty much age 7 and up, on domestic violence, sexual abuse. We do presentations in the schools as much as we possibly can. We'll do a presentation anywhere. Any company, anybody wants to get a group together, we offer free presentations and so forth for our Wide Awake program, at least once a month. We have self-defense classes. We'll do peer counseling for anyone who needs peer counseling for any domestic violence victims out there. Anything you possibly can need from a domestic violence or a sexual abuse standpoint or a missing person standpoint, we can get you. If we don't have it, we will find you a resource for it. We do not have a hotline as of yet. We are pretty new, still 3 years in, but it's only, you know, that's pretty much nothing for a new foundation. But we have at least 9 programs that we can offer people at this point. Emergency shelter if needed, stuff like that. We have a little device called our Angel Alert program, which is a device that you carry. If you're in fear for your life, you can just press the button and dispatches help right to you. It tracks you anywhere in the United States, up to 30 feet. So you can talk to a live dispatcher at that point, and it does a lot of different things. Our Stephanie's Overwatch program, where we will escort people to the courthouses or go to hearings or whatever they have to do if they're in fear, if they have to do a child exchange, custody exchange, we'll go with them just to make sure they have somebody with them at all times. So many programs that we do. You know, our website has everything on there. It's smpfoundation.org. And if you want to call us directly, our administration number is 732-462-5793. And there's always somebody there. If they don't answer for some reason, they'll call you right back.
I thank you so much, Ed Parze, for sharing this heartbreaking story. And again, to contact the Stephanie Nicole Parze Foundation, smpfoundation.org. And let's
Yes.
prevent this from ever happening again.
Yeah, it's SNP as in Nancy.
Oh,
Sure,
SNP. Okay. snpfoundation.org. I thank you so much. And I'm so sorry.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
If you missed any part of this conversation, you can download the iHeartRadio app. It is free. And all of my interviews live on the podcast Sunstein Sessions. And I'll join you tomorrow morning on the Jim Kerr Rock and Roll Morning Show, Q104.3.
New York's classic rock, Q104.3.